He's beating the Big 12 in a very different way, actually good for Arizona football and Arizona basketball.
You are Locked On Wildcats, your daily podcast on the Arizona Wildcats. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for keeping it Locked On Wildcats and making this your first listen of the day. Locked On, your team every day. All right, now we are going to talk a lot about Arizona and how they are in the Big 12. And why, in a weird way, it is good for, I think, basketball and football, and why I think we can also make the case too that we are in a really good spot here for the Wildcats. So we will find out. But the first thing I want to talk about is, and we're going to do a little bit of a look back and a little bit of a look ahead. But the first thing too is, when Arizona went into the Big 12, I think there was a lot of question marks about where Arizona, was this a good move for the Wildcats? Was this a good move, getting out of the conference that they had been in for, well, basically since 1980. And it's a mixed bag, obviously. But yes, it was the right move because, again, that conference had basically gone away. And I think there's a reason why. And it was because of, just basically incompetence, snobbiness, all of that stuff, and a bunch of schools that just didn't really care about sports anymore. So there's an interesting situation that goes on there. But when it comes to Arizona football, I think it's a good thing that Arizona is in the Big 12 as opposed to just another conference. And ASU is a massive reason why. When you look at ASU, it's pretty easy to sit here and say that, yes, they were very, very good this past year, but are they really doing that in the Pac-12 where they're playing against, your Oregons, your schools like that? Probably not. And again, the Big 12 is just good enough that it gets enough credit, but if you put together a good team, if you put together a good staff, I think that you could make the case that Arizona could be in a pretty good spot. Now, again, with NIL is obviously different. NIL makes things NIL in the Big Ten and the SEC when it comes to football is a monster, and that's always going to be the case, at least the way it is going forward, and I think that's something that you obviously have to look at. The first thing, though, that I would say, though, about Arizona being in the Big 12 is that you're going to have to be able to evaluate. You're going to be able to have to make some decisions here that listen, you're not going to always be able to maintain your best players. That kind of goes without saying. But you're going to have to also be at the stage too where that like I said, what's that next step then? And I think for Arizona, the big thing is you have to look at it and you have to say, all right, can this team, if everything breaks right, win a Big 12 title? Now, I'm not talking about necessarily this year. As a matter of fact, I'd be stunned if that happened this year. That is not at all what I'm talking about. What I am talking about, though, is, if everything breaks right, yeah, you could win the conference because there's nobody in that conference that you look at and you're just like, man, no way, shape, or form. That's going to be an issue that Arizona can't really, things can happen. So you look around though, and I think ASU is kind of that road mark. Now again, they're a lot better. Dilly is the man, but they went from last to first. I don't think that could really happen in. I don't think that can really happen in another stratosphere. That can happen. Now, what does it take for Arizona then when it comes to football? Listen, you're going to have to. I think the skill position guys that you can get are good. I think that we've gone over this a million times. I think that they got pretty good skill guys. I think the problem though with the offensive line is the offensive line, and that's always going to be the problem. I think with Arizona is what those offensive linemen look like. I think that's a situation too where you're like, okay, where are we then? And so we will find that one out. But Arizona, I think, is in a good spot. And it's a weird way, but I think Arizona's in a good spot when it comes to football, because, again, it's a good enough conference that, if you win it, you're obviously going to get in there, and then you just kind of take your chances from there. So we will see. Now, is Brent Brennan that guy? I mean, listen, it's hard to really sit here and say that Brent Brennan is that guy after what we watched this past year, but I'm going to give him another chance. He's a guy that I think you look at and you're like, all right, well, he's a really good guy, but what can he, can he make that? Can he elevate Arizona? And I don't know that there's really any indication that he can elevate Arizona, but who knows? Maybe he can. We shall see. But it's a good spot though for Arizona, and it's like I said, I think getting into Texas, you can get a lot of 3-star kids. You're going to have to coach up a lot of 3-star kids, but you can maybe do that if that's the case. Now, Brent Brennan though. He's going to have to show that he's resourceful. Now, I will say this: when he was at San Jose State, he certainly showed that he was resourceful. He certainly showed that he could really do what he needed to do. And we're going to see if he can do that now in the Pac-12. The problem is last year he didn't do that, and that was obviously, I think, why everybody was so disappointed, is that it was a massive, massive disappointment on a myriad of different levels, because I think people thought that, well, hey man, you inherited a pretty good situation and you pretty much squandered that. And but again, now this is going to be his team. This is going to be his situation to be able to sit here and say, all right, I'm going to take this, and I'm going to be able to go with it. And again, we shall see. But Arizona, you look at it, you look in that schedule, and there's nobody there that you're like, oh man, you're going to lose by 9,000 points. There's no Ohio States or Alabamas or, anything like that. So in a weird way, maybe it is good for Arizona. I think the thing that kills you though is the NIL. The NIL disparity will always be a massive, massive problem as long as you're in the Big 12. Not in basketball, because again, we're going to get to that in a second. But when it comes to football, that's really kind of something that you don't really come away and say that you're like, all right, Arizona can weather this. I just don't think that is the case. But again, you're just going to have to be able to coach them up. Overall, though, I think it's a pretty good situation for Arizona. Now, when it comes to how we got here, then I think a big part of this too is that Arizona, and I think Jed Fish knew this, was that it was going to be pretty difficult for Arizona to be able to compete from an NIL perspective and to be able to get guys like a Jacob Cowing, for example. Last year, Arizona needed a really good number 2 receiver, and Arizona was just not going to be able to afford that. So if the coach gets it, that is what it is, but you probably weren't going to be able to afford that, and obviously, that turned out to be the case. Coincidentally, though, I think Arizona did a pretty good job putting that together. But you got here, though, because we'll find out. But like I said, I think Arizona's in an interesting spot. Now, when it comes to basketball is interesting in all of this because I think it dramatically helps Arizona in basketball being in the Big 12. Being in the Big 12, I think, is just a huge. It's just a huge, huge advantage because now again you are going to be able to put together a squad that is going to play against the best teams in the country, and you might lose some games. There's definitely a chance that you're going to lose some games. As a matter of fact, you look at Tommy Lloyd, and Tommy Lloyd has basically said that. We want to play the best teams in the country, and we're going to lose some of those games. But guess what? We're going to be ready for March. And I think you saw that, and I think you saw that bear its fruit. Now, I think there's something, too, that you could see from Arizona that might be able to take them to the next level. But first, FanDuel, my friends, FanDuel, check it out. All right, here's the deal with FanDuel. Go to FanDuel.com. Okay, all kinds of really good stuff. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot, Aaron Gordon, or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live with player props, all of that. Now, the cool thing about it is, we're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. Again, the cool thing too with FanDuel also is if you're saying to yourself, man, I know exactly I know exactly what I want to bet. I'm going to take some of this, and I'm going to say to myself, man, we're in some really, really good shape here. I'm excited to see what happens, because I think that the NBA playoffs is fantastic. We love the NBA playoffs, so check it out. Thanks for keeping it locked on Wildcats and making this your first listen of the day. I am your host, Mike Luke. All right, now let's talk a little bit about where we are at now when it comes to Arizona basketball in the Big 12. Arizona basketball in the Big 12 is in an interesting spot because, again, I think you're going to see this team continue to get better. I think it was great for the program. And again, I'm going to say this time, and I'm going to say this time and time again, that this is, when you see where Arizona is, when you see where they are at, I don't know that they're beating Oregon. I really don't know that they're beating Oregon. As a matter of fact, I don't think they're beating Oregon, because you got to remember, Arizona had that malaise, as it was, Arizona had this malaise, and I think that the thing about it is that you just kind of went through the motions. You always had these midseason slumps in the Pac-12, and I think a big reason why is because you weren't really being tested. These games were impossible to go against, and this is a program that just needed to be better. That just needed to, I think, be in a better spot. So you look at it, and I think that this is great for Arizona basketball, because it's going to force Arizona to force Arizona to continue to play. And the other thing too, the NIL is not nearly as big a thing in college basketball as it is in college football. In college basketball, Arizona is in a very competitive situation. They are in a very competitive situation with almost all schools. And, in football, they are just not in a competitive situation they're just not in a competitive situation in all phases. And I think, and that's just kind of where it's at. So the big thing is Arizona, like I said, this is great for them. Every single week, every single game, you've got big time schools that are coming to the forefront. And you're going to be playing at Kansas, going to be coming here. Houston's going to be playing here. Again, and then you look at the out of conference. Kids want to play in that, and I think that's what's exciting about all of that, is that kids want to play in this situation. And I think that's just, I look at it is where is this team then going forward? And I think that they can compete with pretty much anybody. I think Tommy Lloyd has shown with the 2025 recruiting class that he is in a really, really good spot. He knows exactly what he wants from his players, and he knows the kind of players that he wants to get, and they're going to be tougher in the Big 12. That is a big part of all of this. They're just going to be tougher. They're going to be stronger. They're going to be more athletic. They're going to be in a different spot entirely. And you're not going to have to worry about those mid-season slumps where everybody's just kind of going through the motions. Now, what is that next step then? I think Tommy Lloyd, with his players, he's got to continue to just show out and show that, this is a week in, week out. It's going to be a gauntlet. I don't really care if Arizona finishes third in the conference. That means really nothing to me. If Arizona finishes third in the conference and they're a 3 seed, boom, that's cool. And I think you can see that would be the case. Everybody thought that, and one thing about Tommy Lloyd, too, is that he generally rises to the occasion. Now, there's been times where You could say in the NCAA tournament they didn't, and that's probably fair. But I would quibble a little bit and say I think it's very difficult when you're in a conference that literally doesn't care about sports to be able to maintain that hard competitive edge the entire time. And that is that is kind of where I think it is at this point. Now, the looking ahead, though, this is not a situation like it is with football where it's very difficult to see Arizona really being competitive than in football or being able to compete at the highest level. I think that there was a time with football where, on a given season, Arizona could compete at the highest level. But they can't really do that anymore. They're like I said, you're going to have a couple seasons here or there, but it's going to be like ASU, where it's like once every 10 seasons, like we've done before. In basketball, you're in a good spot. You're in a good spot, and I think that like I said, you've been able to figure out the NIL perspective. You've been able to figure out the that you're going to be bringing in top 3 to 5 classes. Also, Arizona is going to be a very, very sought-after destination because kids want to play in these big-time environments. They want to play against these big-time schools in these big-time atmospheres, and I think that's, like I said, I think that's something that is very, very enticing to a variety of kids, and any kid that has a competitive streak, any kid that's got a competitive bone in his body, he's going to be interested by that, and why wouldn't you? Because, again, it's fun. You want to see, you want to be in situations like this. And that's what the Big 12 offers you. Now, we'll circle back to that in a little bit. But, some of the other sports, though, I think if you're Arizona, you're in some tough shape. Softball and baseball is in a, that's just not. Now, listen, with baseball, I think that you should be able to be good because you look at some of these teams that are really good in baseball that have kind of taken over or, that have done well. They're not that. These aren't traditional powers with a ton of money, but softball's a different animal now. Softball, the SEC basically controls everything. From a money perspective, I mean, you're able to pay girls. Girls are going to go there, and girls are going to go there and be, and girls are going to be there, and they're going to be able to, like I said, really, like I said, get paid, and that's, good for them. In the Big 12, you don't really have that, and I think that's something that's a little, always going to be a little bit frustrating for Arizona. So it's just not. This isn't the situation before where every girl grows up wanting to be an Arizona Wildcat. That's, like I said, that's just not really the case anymore. So I think that you can hope that they can be good, that name, that appeal, that gravitas can bring some players in, but it's just not the same way. That's just not the same that it's been before, and I think that's something, like I said, it's something that's kind of sad. It's something, too, that I also look at and I say, all right, how good can Arizona be going forward? And we're going to talk about both of those here in just a second. But I think one thing, though, we do need to address is one of the hallmarks of Arizona athletics. Thanks for keeping it locked on Wildcats and making this your first listen of the day. I am your host, Mike Luke. All right, now let's talk a little bit then about where Arizona softball is and what they can do. Is Caitlin Lowe the right coach? I don't know, probably not. But I think you've also got to just kind of. I think I would give her one more year. She had good success her first year, these last 2 years, and this year she was pretty good. But then there's a lot of really, really questionable coaching decisions that made no sense. And I think that's something that's going to be very difficult to look past. Chip Hale, that book is still to be written. Listen, Chip Hale has made the postseason every time as an Arizona baseball coach. Nobody else has done that. Now, again, I get that he hasn't been successful in the playoffs. I get all of that. I'm not disputing any of that. But I think he's also shown that he can recruit at a fairly decent level. And I think he's also shown, too, that kids respond to him. The big thing is can he get Arizona into that top 10, 15 realm? People need to understand, too, that this isn't, with realignment and how things have changed, this is a little bit of a different ball game entirely. This is a different ball game than than we've really seen before. And I don't really know how else to put it other than the fact that kids are getting paid now in non-revenue sports. You can go to a school in the SEC and you can get paid a lot of money to do that. That's why Jay Johnson left. You can get paid a lot of money to do that. In baseball, it's hard. If you're promising a kid, hey, we'll get you a scholarship, that's awesome. But if another school's saying, hey, but also we'll also give you $80,000 a year, well, I mean, you kind of do the math on that one. Those two sports are going to be interesting, like I said, to see how that one plays out. But it's also not just unique to an Arizona thing as well. It's also unique to a just a college sports entirely. And so they got to figure out something to do with this. You get kids now that are basically begging to play for 5, 6, 7 years. I don't get that. Like I said, I like Fran Fraschilla a lot. I didn't agree with his college breakdown that that everybody should play 5 years now, because what's stopping you at 5 years? Why not 6 years? Why not 7 years? I would still keep it at 4. I mean, it's got us this far. It doesn't make a ton of sense to me, especially when guys have been playing basketball since 2019 and they're just trying to get more years out of it. I don't really get that. It doesn't make a ton of sense to me. But either way, though, back to the revenue sports. I think Arizona football is in a decent spot, mainly because I think if you put together a good roster, you can compete, and you can compete for a conference championship if things break your way. I mean, ASU showed that last year. Nobody picked ASU, and they didn't have any NFL players on there. Now, again, you might say, well, Jordan Tyson or Sam, whatever the case may be, will be picks next year. Cool, but at the end of the day, they still had one pick. Arizona is Arizona's had a bunch of picks. You're just going to have to be able to coach him up, and that will be something. Basketball, though, it's great. Basketball, it's going to raise everything up, because again, when you look at basketball, you look at that out of conference, and then you look at the in-conference, and Arizona's got the toughest schedule in the entire country next year, and I think that's going to be something that's going to be super exciting, because some of these teams aren't going anywhere. Give you an idea, BYU ain't going anywhere. As long as you can pay, and I got no problem with this, as long as you can pay for players, BYU, not going anywhere. You got, like I said, Houston, as long as Kelvin Sampson's there, not going anywhere. Kansas, you get the gist. And that's going to force Arizona to be good. It's also going to force programs like Arizona State. They're going to stink. And that's where I think it's going to be fun to watch, though. They are going to stink, and I think that is going to be a fun thing to watch in all of this, mainly just because they don't care. I would put it far more likely that Arizona football is good than Arizona State basketball is good. Like I said, mainly because they don't care, and that arena is a dump. That is probably the worst arena that might be the worst arena in Power 5. Or Power 4. That's how bad it is. And nobody wants to go play there. They don't recruit well, and that's always going to be an issue. But overall, it's been a good move for Arizona. Again, it's going, some of the circumstances are outside Arizona's control. I get all of that, but at the same time, you also know that this is a situation where, you can find benefits in both, and I think for the revenue sports, it's an advantage. The thing with Arizona, though, is that you just want to continue to put yourself in the best possible situation, because there is going to be another conference blow up here at some point, probably in the next 4 or 5 years, and that is going to be something where you want to be able to really. You really want to be able to put yourself in the best possible situation. Is Nick Saban going to be in charge of it, or whatever the case may be? But Arizona, you want to get one of those tickets into a major conference if this thing does blow up again. And I think Brett Yormark's plan probably is that he wants to make sure that they basically outflank the ACC, and that they make the Big 12 that third conference. If you do that, you would have eliminated the ACC. You also would have eliminated the Pac-12 while you're at it. And, Brett Yormark has certainly shown that he knows how to do that. We're going to talk about that conference approach, though, and what that would mean for Arizona tomorrow. Because, like I said, I think there's a lot of fascinating points to throw in there. But like I said, Arizona's in a good spot. You just got to continue to win because you want yourself to be looked at in the most favorable light for when that poaching season does come, because it will come again. Like I said, with baseball and softball, it's unfortunate, but I think that's just kind of where we're at, although I do have a little bit more hope for, I think, baseball probably than I do softball. But as always, very much appreciate you all making Locked On Wildcats your first listen of the day. I'm your host, Mike Luke. Again, Locked On, your team every day. We're going to talk a little bit about the conference CEOs, basically a college football CEO tomorrow, maybe a Nick Saban type, and what that would exactly mean. But thanks again. We will be back with you tomorrow. Locked On, your team every day.